My name is Elise Mercer. I'm 29 years old, and for nearly 4 years, my parents destroyed every chance I had at building a normal life. Not quietly, not accidentally, systematically. Every time I applied for a job, someone would contact the employer before the interview finished. Sometimes it was a phone call, sometimes an anonymous email, sometimes fake documents, but the message was always the same. Elise Mercer is unstable, dangerous. Do not hire her. None of it was true. I'd never been arrested, never used drugs, never even gotten suspended in school. But by 28, I was sleeping in a women's shelter outside Dayton, Ohio, showering at truck stops and pretending not to notice when people locked their car doors near me. Meanwhile, every Sunday night, my father sent the same text: "Come home, admit you were wrong, we can still fix this." Like homelessness was a lesson, like they were waiting for me to surrender. Then one rainy morning, a stranger walked into the shelter carrying an old leather briefcase and said 8 words that changed my entire life. "Your grandmother prepared for this years ago." Before I tell you what was inside that case, take a second to like and subscribe if you enjoy emotional family drama stories like this. And tell me honestly in the comments, what's the worst betrayal you've ever experienced from someone who was supposed to protect you? Because nothing destroys your sense of reality faster than realizing the people who raised you are the reason your life is falling apart. I grew up in a town called Briarwood, population barely 5,000, the kind of place where people still leave pies on each other's porches and pretend nobody drinks before noon. My father, Thomas Mercer, managed the local grain distribution plant for almost 20 years. My mother, Elaine, taught Sunday school and volunteered at every church fundraiser within 50 miles. From the outside, we looked respectable, wholesome even, but inside our house, everything revolved around obedience. I didn't have my own bank account, didn't choose my own clothes until college. Didn't even know the password to the family internet plan because my father believed privacy creates rebellion. That was his favorite sentence. Privacy creates rebellion. When I was 16, I got a weekend job at a bakery downtown. Nothing glamorous, just early mornings frosting cupcakes and cleaning trays. My checks went directly into an account my mother controlled for safekeeping. I never questioned it. Because when you're raised inside control long enough, you stop recognizing it as control, you call it normal. I graduated second in my class, won 2 scholarship offers, one from a university in Columbus, the other from a private college in Kentucky. I still remember laying the acceptance letters on the kitchen table. My mother barely looked at them. My father folded them carefully and pushed them back toward me. "You don't need to leave home to become educated. But this is full tuition." And I stared at him. He leaned back in his chair calmly. "Girls your age get corrupted when they leave too early." Corrupted. That word followed me for years. Anything independent became corruption. Friends, travel, privacy, dreams, even opinions, so I stayed, worked locally, cooked dinner every night, helped my mother clean the church basement after events, and listened to my father explain why the world outside Briarwood was dangerous. Every conversation somehow ended the same way: nobody will care about you the way family does. At 25, something inside me finally snapped. Not dramatically, there wasn't a screaming match, no broken dishes. I was just standing in the laundry room folding my father's work shirts when a terrifying thought hit me: I am disappearing inside this house. That was the first time I realized fear could feel quiet. The next morning, I drove to the public library 20 minutes away and applied for a receptionist position at a medical supply company in Dayton. Full-time, benefits, actual independence. 3 days later, they called me for an interview. I sat in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. Not because I was scared, because I felt hopeful. And hope was unfamiliar. That night, dinner felt strange. My mother barely spoke. My father kept watching me over the edge of his newspaper like he already knew something. The next morning, I drove to Dayton wearing the only blazer I owned. The hiring manager greeted me warmly. We sat down. She opened my resume, then her expression changed immediately, not cold, uncomfortable, like someone handed her bad news moments earlier. "Before we continue," she said carefully, "is there anything you'd like to disclose regarding your behavioral history?" My stomach dropped. "My what?" She hesitated. "We received a call this morning warning us about emotional instability issues." The room went completely silent. I stared at her. What? She claimed to be a concerned relative. Relative, not anonymous, not hidden, a relative. Something inside me went ice cold. Because suddenly I knew exactly who made the call. I drove home in complete silence. No music, no tears, just the sound of tires against wet pavement and one horrible thought repeating in my head over and over. My parents are trying to ruin my life. Even then, part of me still didn't want to believe it. Because admitting your own parents are sabotaging you feels like stepping outside reality itself. When I pulled into the driveway, my father sat on the porch drinking coffee like always. Boots crossed. Newspaper folded beside him. Completely calm, he looked up once. How'd the interview go? I stared at him for a second too long. His expression didn't change, not even slightly. Fine, I answered quietly. Good, that was it, no curiosity. No follow-up questions, just good, like he already knew exactly what happened. That night I barely slept. Every strange rejection from the last 2 years replayed differently in my head now. The hardware store that suddenly stopped answering calls, the insurance office that went another direction, the daycare position that disappeared 2 hours after my interview. At the time, I blamed myself. My resume, my nerves, my lack of experience. Now I started seeing fingerprints everywhere. Over the next month, I applied to 4 more places: a bookstore, a warehouse office, a dental clinic, a diner off Route 9. Every single one showed interest first. Every single one rejected me within 48 hours. Then the diner owner finally told me the truth. Her name was Marcia, mid-60s, smelled like cigarette smoke and vanilla perfume. She pulled me aside after the interview while wiping down coffee mugs. "Honey," she whispered carefully, "someone called about you." There it was again. My stomach tightened immediately. "What did they say?" Marcia hesitated. "That you have violent episodes." I physically laughed, not because it was funny, because the accusation sounded insane. I've never even been in a fight. Now I started seeing fingerprints everywhere. Over the next month, I applied to 4 more places: a bookstore, a warehouse office, a dental clinic, a diner off Route 9. Every single one showed interest first. Every single one rejected me within 48 hours. Then the diner owner finally told me the truth. Her name was Marcia, mid-60s, smelled like cigarette smoke and vanilla perfume. She pulled me aside after the interview while wiping down coffee mugs. "Honey," she whispered carefully, "someone called about you." There it was again. My stomach tightened immediately. "What did they say?" Marcia hesitated. "That you have violent episodes." I physically laughed, not because it was funny, because the accusation sounded insane. I've never even been in a fight. I figured, was it a man or woman? Woman. My chest hollowed out instantly. Mom, it was Mom. That hurt worse somehow, because fathers control openly. But mothers are supposed to protect. That night I waited until both of my parents went upstairs before walking quietly into my mother's sewing room. Tiny floral wallpaper, lavender candles, everything neat enough to feel staged. I opened the desk drawer beside her sewing machine, searching for absolutely nothing specific, and that's when I found the notebook. Small, dark green cover. My mother's handwriting inside, perfect cursive. Every job I'd applied for listed carefully down the left side of the page, every single one. Beside each entry sat tiny notes: called manager directly, spoke to hiring supervisor. Handled. The room tilted beneath me. I sat down slowly in her desk chair, staring at the pages while my heartbeat pounded so hard it hurt. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't overprotective parenting. This was organized sabotage. My mother had been tracking my escape attempts like prison records. I didn't sleep at all that night. At 6:12 a.m., I placed the notebook directly in the center of the breakfast table. My father looked at it first, then my mother. The color drained from her face instantly. "Elise," she whispered, "why were you going through my things?" Not denial, not confusion, just immediate guilt. "You called my employers." My mother started crying almost immediately. Real tears. That was the terrifying part. She genuinely believed she was the victim. "We were protecting you. By telling people I'm dangerous." "You're naive," my father interrupted calmly while buttering toast. "The world out there will destroy someone like you. So you decided to do it first?" His eyes finally lifted toward mine. Cold, steady, controlled. "You have no survival skills." "I'm 25. "You're emotionally unstable." I almost laughed again. Emotionally unstable. The same phrase from the interview. They'd rehearsed this narrative together. My mother reached across the table desperately. "Elise, sweetheart, you don't understand how bad people can be." "I understand perfectly now." The silence afterward felt enormous. Then my father spoke again. "If you leave this house against our wishes," he folded his napkin carefully, "you leave with nothing." I thought he was bluffing. He wasn't. I packed after midnight. Quietly, one backpack, 3 shirts, jeans, toothbrush, phone charger, the silver necklace my grandmother gave me when I turned 18. That was all. I opened my banking app before leaving. Balance, $4.83. At first I thought it had to be a glitch. I refreshed twice. Same number. My hands started shaking immediately. For almost 9 years, every paycheck I earned went into the family account my mother managed for me. Birthday money, holiday cash, savings from the bakery, everything gone. I walked straight into my father's office holding my phone. "Where's my money?" He didn't even look surprised. He slowly removed his reading glasses. "That account belongs to this household." "No," I whispered. "That was my money. It paid for your food, your clothes, your upbringing." "My upbringing?" My voice cracked hard on those words. "You mean raising your own daughter?" My mother appeared in the hallway behind me, already crying again. "Elise, please don't make this ugly." Ugly. Interesting word considering they'd spent years quietly destroying my future. "I need my documents," I said. "Birth certificate. Social security card." My father leaned back in his chair calmly. "No." I genuinely thought I misheard him. "What? You're clearly not stable enough to manage adult responsibilities right now." I stared at him. Then suddenly something terrifying clicked into place. This was never about protection. It was ownership. Jobs meant income. Income meant independence. Independence meant losing control over me. And my parents would rather destroy my life completely than risk that happening. At 11:14 p.m., I walked out of the Mercer house carrying one backpack and $4. My mother stood on the porch crying dramatically. My father stood behind her like a shadow. "If you leave," he said calmly, "don't expect this family to rescue you." I almost answered. But something stopped me, because deep down I finally understood rescue was never what they wanted. Control was. So instead I turned around and walked into the dark without saying another word. I slept the first night inside my car parked behind a gas station outside Dayton. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead all night. Every time headlights passed, I jolted awake thinking someone would knock on the window. Nobody did. By morning, my phone battery sat at 6%. I used the last of my cash to buy coffee and sit inside long enough to charge it slightly. That's when my father texted me, "Come home, admit you overreacted, we'll discuss conditions." Conditions, like I was negotiating parole. I turned my phone face down and tried not to cry in public. 3 days later, I found the shelter. Women's transitional housing on the edge of Dayton near an old warehouse district. 20 beds, shared bathrooms, industrial soap smell everywhere. The woman running it was named Patricia, late 50s, short gray hair. The kind of face that looked strict until she smiled. She handed me a towel and pointed toward an empty bed near the back wall. "You don't have to explain everything tonight," she said gently. That almost broke me immediately. Because after years of interrogation disguised as parenting, simple kindness felt shocking. The shelter became my entire world for the next several months. I applied for replacement documents, waited in endless government office lines, filled out forms, applied for jobs farther and farther away from Briarwood hoping distance would finally protect me. It didn't. A grocery chain in Cincinnati rejected me after an interview, then a call center, then a receptionist job in Columbus. Each rejection arrived fast, too fast, and always after initial interest. Then one hiring manager accidentally forwarded me the email meant for HR internal review. I opened it sitting on my shelter bed. The message contained an attached PDF labeled, "Urgent Safety Concern Regarding Applicant Elise Mercer." My father's writing style hit me instantly. Formal, cold, corporate language. The document claimed I had a history of emotional outbursts and unpredictable behavior. At the bottom sat a fake case number designed to resemble a police report. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My parents weren't just sabotaging me anymore, They were evolving, and suddenly I realized something horrifying. There was no line they wouldn't cross. By month 6, my parents had turned my entire hometown against me, not loudly. Quietly, that was their specialty, a whisper here, a concerned phone call there. A carefully timed public performance designed to make me look unstable while they looked heartbroken. And in a town like Briarwood, people believe crying parents faster than exhausted daughters, especially religious parents, especially respected ones. My father proved that during the town council meeting. Patricia warned me beforehand. "Your dad signed up to speak tonight." I should have stayed away. Instead, I sat in the back row wearing a borrowed coat and watched my father destroy me publicly for 23 straight minutes. He stood behind the podium looking devastated, practiced devastated. "I'm here as a concerned father," he began, voice already cracking slightly. The room immediately softened toward him. "I don't recognize my daughter anymore." People nodded sympathetically. My mother sat in the front row dabbing tears from her eyes with a tissue. Perfect performance. My father continued carefully. "She's fallen into unhealthy influences. She's living in shelters now. We've begged her to come home." Begged, interesting word considering the threats. The stolen money, the fake reports. But nobody there knew that because abusers are rarely monsters in public. Public monsters get caught. The dangerous ones become victims first. "I just want my little girl back," my father whispered. A woman near the front actually started crying. I sat frozen in the back row while dozens of people looked at me with pity. Not support, pity, like I was some unstable runaway rejecting loving parents. Nobody asked for my side. Nobody asked why a 29-year-old woman needed permission to leave home. The meeting ended with people hugging my parents, comforting them, praying with them, and suddenly Briarwood stopped feeling like a town. It felt like surveillance. The grocery clerk started watching me differently. The gas station cashier barely spoke anymore. One church volunteer pulled me aside outside the shelter kitchen and whispered, "Sweetheart, maybe going home would heal everybody." Everybody. Funny how everybody never included me. That same week, the shelter director called me into her office. Patricia closed the door gently. That alone scared me. "I received a phone call this morning." My stomach dropped instantly. "From my parents? A woman claiming to be a licensed counselor." I physically felt my pulse spike. "What did she say?" Patricia looked furious now. "She claimed you had violent episodes and posed a risk to other residents." My vision blurred slightly. My mother, my own mother, trying to get me removed from the only safe place I had left. Patricia leaned forward quietly. "I know it was false." That sentence almost made me cry. Because after months of manipulation, being believed felt unfamiliar. "She sounded rehearsed," Patricia continued. "People who genuinely fear someone don't speak that calmly." I looked down at my hands. "They want me desperate enough to come back?" Patricia didn't answer. She didn't need to. We both knew it was true. That night, lying awake in the shelter bunk, I kept hearing one memory over and over. My grandmother Elise sitting beside me on her farmhouse porch years earlier saying, "If things ever become unbearable, someone will find you." At the time, I thought she meant emotionally. Now, I wasn't so sure. The next morning, Patricia stopped me near the supply closet. "There's something else." She handed me a business card. Simple white cardstock, no fancy design. Just a name, Miriam Voss, licensed private investigator. I stared at it. "A woman came looking for you 2 weeks ago," Patricia explained. Middle-aged, gray coat, calm voice, said it was important. My first thought hit instantly. Dad hired someone to track me down, another trap, another manipulation. I almost handed the card back. Then Patricia added quietly, "She didn't feel dangerous." I slipped the card into my pocket anyway, didn't call. Didn't trust it, but somehow I couldn't throw it away either. 3 days later, my father texted again. "Still pretending strangers are the problem?" Then another message, "You're too fragile to survive without us." I stared at the screen for almost a full minute, then finally blocked the number. My hands shook afterward, not because I regretted it, because cutting off control feels terrifying when control is all you've ever known. That same night, I pulled the investigator's card out again. Miriam Voss, private investigator. Something about the name felt familiar somehow. At 2:13 a.m., sitting alone in the shelter laundry room beside broken dryers and fluorescent lights, I finally dialed the number. And the woman who answered changed everything. The woman on the phone sounded nothing like I expected. Not aggressive, not secretive, just calm, steady. "Is this Elise Mercer?" she asked softly. I hesitated. "Yes. My name is Miriam Voss. Thank you for finally calling me." Something about the sentence unsettled me immediately. Finally, like she'd been waiting. "What do you want?" A pause, then, "To finish something your grandmother started." The laundry room suddenly felt very small. "What does my grandmother have to do with this?" Another brief silence. "Everything." My heartbeat started pounding instantly. My grandmother Elena died 3 years earlier, heart failure, quick, unexpected. At least that's what my parents told me. I gripped the phone harder. "How do you know my grandmother?" "She hired me." I stopped breathing for a second. "What?" "She retained my services 9 years ago." 9 years. I would have been 20, long before the shelter, long before the fake reports, long before I even realized my parents were controlling me. She instructed me to intervene only if certain patterns escalated. Patterns, not incidents. Patterns, like Grandma Elena already knew exactly who my parents really were. Miriam continued carefully. "Your grandmother believed your father was becoming increasingly coercive. She worried isolation would eventually turn into full dependency control." I leaned back against the dryer behind me trying to process the words, because suddenly childhood memories started rearranging themselves. Grandma Elena insisting I memorize important phone numbers, secret birthday cash hidden inside books, the way she always whispered, "Every woman should have money nobody else controls." At the time, I thought she was just old-fashioned. Now I realized she was warning me. "She left something for you," Miriam said quietly. My chest tightened immediately. "What kind of something?" "A contingency plan." I almost laughed from disbelief, not because it sounded ridiculous, because it sounded exactly like my grandmother. Practical, prepared, quietly strategic. Miriam gave me an address downtown and asked to meet the following morning. I barely slept that night. Every possibility ran through my head. Maybe this was fake. Maybe my father somehow manipulated everything. Maybe I was finally losing my mind exactly the way my parents claimed. But deep down, something felt different. For the first time in months, fear wasn't the strongest emotion anymore. Curiosity was. The next morning, Miriam met me inside a tiny law office above an antique store in Dayton. She looked exactly how Patricia described her. Mid-50s, short silver hair, no jewelry except a plain watch. Professional without trying to impress anyone. The moment I sat down, she placed an old leather briefcase carefully on the desk between us. My breath caught instantly, because written across the front flap in faded ink were 4 words in my grandmother's handwriting. "For Elise, when necessary." I physically covered my mouth. Miriam watched quietly while I stared at it. "She prepared this almost a decade ago," she explained softly. "She really thought things would get this bad?" Miriam didn't answer immediately. Then finally, "She thought they could get worse." That sentence chilled me completely. Slowly, I opened the briefcase. Inside sat a sealed, cream-colored envelope. My name written across the front in Elise Mercer's elegant cursive. My hands shook, breaking the seal. "Elise, if you are reading this, then your parents finally crossed the line I spent years praying they would never cross. First, none of this is your fault. People who confuse control with love often become cruel when they lose access to power. Your father learned that behavior from his own father. Your mother learned survival by obeying stronger personalities. Neither of them healed before raising you, so they turned fear into parenting." I wiped tears from my face before continuing. "Inside this case is everything you need to survive independently. Use it carefully. Do not waste your life trying to convince broken people to love correctly. Love should not require captivity." Grandma Elena. By the time I finished reading, I was crying hard enough I couldn't speak. Not because of the money, not yet. Because for the first time in my entire life, someone finally saw exactly what was happening to me, and believed me before I even had proof. Miriam waited until I finished crying before opening the second compartment inside the briefcase. That's when everything changed. Folders, dozens of them, carefully labeled by year. Employment interference, bank withdrawals, recorded calls, surveillance logs. My stomach dropped instantly. "What is all this?" "Evidence," Miriam answered calmly. My entire body went cold, because suddenly I understood. My grandmother didn't just suspect my parents were controlling. She documented them, For years, Miriam slid the first folder toward me. Inside sat printed transcripts of phone calls, my mother's voice, clear as day, telling employers I was unstable, dangerous, emotionally unpredictable. Each transcript included dates, times, phone numbers, and recordings legally obtained through investigative monitoring. I stared at the pages, unable to breathe properly. She made 34 separate calls, Miriam explained quietly. Over almost 4 years. 34, not panic, not one emotional mistake, a campaign. The next folder contained screenshots of anonymous emails traced back to my parents' home internet. Fake warning letters, forged behavioral complaints, fabricated incident reports designed to resemble official documentation. My father wrote most of them. I recognized his language instantly. Cold, corporate, emotionless, like he was filing paperwork instead of destroying his daughter's future. Then Miriam opened another file, bank records, my bank records. Thousands of dollars transferred slowly over several years from the shared account into private accounts connected to my parents. I felt physically sick. That was my money. Yes, Miriam said softly. And your grandmother knew they were taking it. I looked up immediately. She knew, Miriam nodded once. She confronted your father about financial control repeatedly before her death. Everything suddenly clicked together. The secret cash Grandma Alina used to hide inside birthday cards. The strange questions she asked about my savings. The way she insisted I memorize account numbers just in case. She knew, she always knew. There's more, Miriam said carefully. At the bottom of the briefcase sat one final envelope sealed by a law office downtown. Inside were trust documents. Official, notarized, signed. I scanned the numbers once, then again. Then a third time because my brain genuinely refused to process them. $410,000. My grandmother sold family land years earlier and quietly placed the money into a protected trust under my name. My father never knew it existed. He would have taken it, I whispered automatically. That's exactly what your grandmother believed. My hands trembled holding the paperwork, not because of the money, because suddenly I wasn't trapped anymore. For months, every part of my life depended on surviving one more week, one more meal, one more rejection, one more humiliation. And now, for the first time since leaving home, I could finally breathe without fear sitting on my chest. But Miriam wasn't finished. There's another reason your grandmother hired me. I looked up. She believed someday you might need protection legally. Miriam handed me a business card. Rachel Holloway, civil litigation attorney. She specializes in coercive family abuse, defamation, and financial control cases. The room went completely silent, because suddenly I realized something terrifying. My parents didn't just hurt me emotionally. They committed crimes, real ones, and for the first time, they had absolutely no idea someone documented everything. Rachel Holloway filed the lawsuit 11 days later. Defamation, financial exploitation, fraudulent interference with employment, intentional emotional distress. I remember staring at the paperwork in her office while rain hammered against the windows outside. Because even then, part of me still couldn't fully accept reality. People sue strangers, corporations, scammers, not parents. Rachel seemed to read my mind immediately. Abuse doesn't stop being abuse because you share DNA, she said calmly. That sentence stayed with me. My father got served first, Tuesday morning. 7:42 a.m. A process server handed him the documents while he stood outside the Briarwood diner holding coffee. Half the town saw it happen. My mother got served later that afternoon leaving church Bible study. By sunset, everybody was talking. And suddenly, my parents lost control of the narrative for the first time in years. Because court records don't cry dramatically at town meetings. Court records show evidence. 34 recorded calls, forged behavioral reports, fake complaints sent to employers, documented theft from my shared account, attempts to remove me from shelter housing through false accusations. Facts, cold facts. The same people who once pitied my parents started reading public filings online, and slowly the town's sympathy shifted. Then came the voicemail. My father's voice, shaking with rage. You're humiliating this family over private matters. Private matters, interesting phrase for years of calculated sabotage. Rachel saved the recording immediately. Excellent evidence, she said dryly. My father violated the temporary protection order twice after that, once through email, once by asking a church member to check on me. Both documented, both filed. The judge stopped showing patience quickly. Meanwhile, more people started coming forward voluntarily. A hiring manager from Dayton still had the anonymous email warning them about my violent tendencies. A receptionist remembered my mother calling the office pretending to be a mental health advocate. One employer even saved the fake PDF report because something about it looked strange. The evidence became overwhelming, and suddenly my parents weren't respected victims anymore. They looked exactly what they were: terrified people trying to control someone who escaped. 3 months later, my father refused settlement negotiations entirely. Rachel warned him repeatedly. He ignored her, so the case moved forward, and he lost completely. The judge's ruling lasted 47 pages. I still keep a copy in my apartment drawer, not from bitterness, from validation. Because when you spend years being told your pain isn't real, official truth matters. The court awarded financial damages large enough to force my parents into selling the Briarwood house. The same house where my father monitored every decision I made. The same kitchen where my mother tracked my job applications inside that notebook. Gone, sold. My parents moved into a small rental 40 minutes away where nobody knew them. Nobody admired them. Nobody applauded their performances anymore. But honestly, that wasn't the most satisfying part. The most satisfying part happened quietly, one ordinary Tuesday evening nearly a year later. I was standing inside my own apartment cooking pasta while rain tapped softly against the windows. My cat curled asleep beside the couch. My work bag sat near the door from my job at Rachel's law office. Yes, she hired me afterward. And suddenly it hit me: nobody knew where I was. Nobody checked my phone. Nobody controlled my money. Nobody monitored my choices. The silence felt peaceful instead of dangerous now. That's when I finally understood something. Freedom doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet kitchen where nobody is waiting to punish you for becoming your own person. A few months later, my mother sent a letter through Rachel's office. Not an apology exactly, more like grief finally catching up to her. She wrote, "I thought keeping you close meant keeping you safe. I see now that I confused love with fear." I cried reading that. Not because everything was magically healed, because accountability sounds very different from manipulation. I still haven't fully reconciled with either of them. Maybe someday I will, maybe I won't. Healing doesn't require reopening doors that nearly destroyed you. And that's something people rarely talk about enough. Today, I'm 29 years old. I work full-time at a law office helping organize protective cases for women escaping coercive situations. I'm taking community college classes at night. I have my own car, my own bank account, my own apartment key. Small things, normal things, but when you grew up controlled, normal freedom feels extraordinary. Sometimes I still think about my grandmother sitting on that porch years ago saying, "If things ever become unbearable, someone will find you." She knew, she saw everything long before I did. And instead of teaching me obedience, she quietly prepared my escape. That's what real love looks like, not control disguised as protection, not sabotage disguised as concern. Real love prepares you for freedom. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional family drama stories, toxic family survival stories, cinematic Reddit-style storytelling, and emotional comeback journeys. And tell me honestly in the comments, if your parents destroyed your future to keep control over you, could you ever forgive them?